The crystal towers of Zephyria Prime reached high into the purple sky like giant fingers made of light. Jake Murphy stood at attention in the grand hall, where thousands of alien beings gathered for the ceremony. His human uniform looked plain, next to the flowing robes and shimmering armor of the other species. The air smelled of strange flowers, and something that reminded him of electricity. Princess Lirineth floated above the crowd on a platform of pure energy. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow from within. Long silver hair moved around her, like it was underwater. When she spoke, her voice entered Jake's mind directly, without using his ears. This was how the ethereals communicated with other species. Jake had been to many worlds during his service with Earth's Colonial Defense Force, but nothing compared to this place. The Ethereal Confederation controlled half the galaxy. Their technology was so advanced that most other races thought it was magic. They could move objects with their minds, heal wounds by touching them, and travel between stars and ships that looked like soap bubbles. The ceremony was supposed to celebrate a new trade agreement between humans and ethereals. Earth needed their medical technology. The ethereals wanted human food and music, which they found fascinating for reasons Jake didn't understand. He was part of the security detail, along with 20 other human marines. The ethereals had their own guards, but insisted on this show of cooperation. Princess Lirineth began speaking about friendship between species. Her words flowed like music in Jake's head. She talked about how different races could learn from each other. The human delegates nodded and smiled. Everything seemed peaceful and normal. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, Jake heard a sound he knew well from battlefields. It was the high-pitched whine of energy weapons charging up. His training kicked in immediately. He dropped to the floor and rolled toward the nearest cover, which was a pillar made of some kind of glowing stone. Bright flashes lit up the hall. But these weren't the clean energy beams of ethereal weapons. These were crude and rough, leaving burn marks and smoke. Jake had seen weapons like this before in the outer colonies where pirates and slavers operated. The princess screamed, not with her voice, but with her mind. Jake felt her terror and pain like a punch to his chest. Every person in the hall staggered from the mental impact. The ethereal guards were the worst affected because they shared a deeper connection with their princess. Jake forced himself to move despite the psychic assault. He saw shapes in dark armor surrounding the princess's floating platform. They had some kind of device that was pulling her down toward them. She fought back with her powers, creating shields of blue light, but the device seemed to absorb her energy and use it against her. The human Marines recovered faster than anyone else. They had basic mental shields built into their helmets, a precaution Earth had developed after first contact with telepathic species. Jake and his team began firing at the attackers. Their bullets couldn't penetrate the dark armor, but it distracted the kidnappers. One of the armored figures turned toward Jake. Through the helmet's visor, he saw eyes that weren't quite right. Too large and completely black. Not human, not ethereal, but something else entirely. The figure raised its weapon and fired. Jake dove behind another pillar as the energy beam cut through the air where his head had been. The beam left a smoking hole in the crystal wall behind him. He counted the attackers while changing position. 8 of them, all in the same dark armor, all moving with military precision. The princess was weakening. Her mental voice grew fainter as the device continued draining her power. The ethereal guards were trying to reach her, but they moved slowly, still affected by her psychic distress. The human delegates had taken cover, but weren't trained for combat. Jake noticed something others missed. The attackers knew exactly where to strike and when. They had planned this perfectly, knowing how ethereal ceremonies worked and how the security would respond. But they hadn't expected humans to recover so quickly from the mental attack. He signaled to Lieutenant Amy Foster, who was positioned on the other side of the hall. She was the smartest person he knew, and always saw patterns others missed. Even in the chaos, she was taking notes on her scanner, recording everything that happened. The attackers finished whatever they were doing to the princess. She went limp. On their energy restraints, one of them activated a device that opened a tier in space itself. Jake had heard of this technology, but never seen it. Only the most advanced and illegal organizations had access to portable TELEPORTERS before jumping. Through the portal, the leader of the attackers looked directly at Jake. Even through the armor, Jake felt those black eyes studying him. Then they were gone, taking Princess Lyraneth with them. The portal closed with a sound like thunder. Emergency lights came on throughout the hall. Ethereal healers rushed to help the wounded, while their security forces sealed all exits. Counselor Veltaran, the princess's advisor, appeared in a flash of silver light. His usually calm face showed panic and rage. Jake approached the spot where the princess had been taken. The floor was covered in burn marks and strange symbols that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. He knelt down and ran his scanner over the area. The readings were unlike anything in human databases. Amy joined him, her own scanner beeping rapidly. She showed him the energy signatures she had recorded during the attack. Jake didn't understand all the technical details, but he could see they didn't match any known ethereal enemies. Counselor Veltaran's voice filled everyone's minds with crushing authority. He demanded answers from the human security team. How had this happened during their watch? Why had they failed to protect the princess? His mental pressure made several humans fall to their knees. Jake stood up slowly, fighting against the psychic force. He had learned something important during the attack. The weapons, the armor, the tactics, even the smell of the smoke from their energy beams, all pointed to one thing. These weren't political enemies of the Ethereal Confederation. They were slavers. The Ethereal Council Chamber looked like the inside of a giant crystal. Light moved through the walls in patterns that hurt Jake's eyes to follow. He stood with Amy and Ben in the center while 12 ethereal counselors floated in a circle around them. Their combined mental presence felt like standing in a thunderstorm. Counselor Veltaran spoke without moving his lips. His thoughts pressed against Jake's mind like cold metal. The Ethereals had spent 2 full days searching for Princess Lyraneth, using every method their advanced civilization possessed. Psychic trackers had found nothing. Their quantum sensors showed no trace of her energy signature. Even their time-sight abilities, which could see echoes of past events, had been somehow blocked. Jake listened carefully while the counselors described their failed efforts. They had questioned every species with grievances against the Confederation. They had scanned every ship that left Zephyria Prime before, during, and after the ceremony. They had even reached out to their spies and criminal organizations across the galaxy. All leads had turned cold. Amy stepped forward, despite the crushing psychic pressure. She was small compared to the floating ethereals, but her voice stayed steady. She told them that human investigators worked differently. While ethereal methods relied on advanced technology and mental abilities, humans used pattern recognition and intuitive thinking that had evolved over millions of years of survival. Counselor's response felt like ice in Jake's brain. They considered humans a primitive warrior species that had barely learned to travel between stars. How could creatures who still used chemical bullets and metal ships succeed where the galaxy's most advanced civilization had failed? Jake had expected this reaction. Every alien species they met looked down on humanity at first. Humans had no telepathy, no energy manipulation, no technology that seemed magical. What they did have was stubbornness and the ability to see things others missed. Ben Hayes, their tech specialist, showed the counselors what he had found in the scan data from the attack. While the ethereals had focused on analyzing the unknown energy signatures, Ben had looked at something simpler. The burn patterns on the floor formed a specific shape when viewed from above. It was a symbol used by the Void Reapers, a criminal organization that operated in lawless space. The counselors dismissed this immediately. The Void Reapers were common pirates and smugglers. They lacked the resources and technology to kidnap an ethereal princess from the heart of the Confederation. Their mental voices buzzed with annoyance at such a ridiculous suggestion. Amy pulled out her scanner and showed them the energy readings she had recorded during the attack. She had noticed something the ethereal investigators missed because they thought it was unimportant. The weapons used by the attackers had been modified with ethereal technology. Not stolen technology, but legally purchased components that had been altered for illegal use. This got the counselors' attention. Amy explained that someone had been buying specific parts from ethereal merchants over the past year. Always small quantities, always different buyers, always paid for with untraceable credits. When combined, these parts could create the exact type of weapon system used in the kidnapping. Jake watched the counselors' floating forms as they processed this information. Their initial dismissal was changing to grudging interest. They began sharing rapid mental communications that excluded the humans. Finally, Counselor Vel Tehran addressed them again. The ethereals would allow the human team to investigate, but only because their own methods had failed. They expected the humans to prove their limitations within a few days. When Jake and his team inevitably failed, it would demonstrate why primitive species should leave complex problems to their betters. Jake nodded his acceptance. He had worked with alien prejudice before. The best way to change minds was through results, not arguments. He asked for access to merchant records and permission to question potential witnesses. The counselors agreed, but assigned an ethereal observer to monitor their investigation. The observer was named Kethmiran, a young ethereal who specialized in criminal psychology. His mental voice carried curiosity mixed with skepticism. He wanted to see how humans approached problem-solving without access to advanced technology or psychic abilities. Amy began by creating what she called a timeline of purchases. Using merchant records, she tracked every sale of the specific components needed to build the kidnappers' weapons. The pattern that emerged surprised even Jake. The purchases had been made across 17 different worlds over 8 months. Each buyer had used perfect forged credentials and paid with credits that vanished after the transaction. Ben analyzed the forged credentials and found something interesting. While each identity was completely fake, they all contained subtle coding, errors that matched a specific counterfeit operation. This operation was based on Nexus Station, a trading post in neutral space that asked no questions about its customers. Jake studied the information while walking through the crystal gardens outside the council chamber. The kidnapping had required months of preparation, detailed knowledge of ethereal ceremony protocols, and access to highly restricted technology. This wasn't random piracy. Someone had specifically targeted Princess Lyraneth for reasons that went beyond simple ransom demands. Kethmiran floated beside him, his silver robes flowing in the artificial breeze. He asked why Jake believed the Void Reapers were involved, when they seemed too primitive for such a sophisticated operation. The question showed that even curious ethereals still thought in terms of technological advancement rather than criminal cunning. Jake explained that human criminals had taught him something important during his years in law enforcement before joining the military. The most dangerous criminals weren't always the ones with the best equipment. They were the ones willing to take risks that logical minds would consider impossible. The Void Reapers specialized in capturing high-value targets from supposedly secure locations. Amy called them over to her portable workstation. She had found something in the merchant records that the ethereal investigators had overlooked. One of the fake buyers had made an additional purchase that wasn't needed for the weapons. He had bought a neural inhibitor designed to suppress telepathic abilities in captured subjects. This changed everything. The kidnapping wasn't about ransom or political pressure. Someone wanted Princess Lyraneth alive, but powerless. Ben cross-referenced the neural inhibitor purchase with known criminal organizations that used such devices. Only one group had both. The resources and motivation to pull off this kind of operation. The Void Reapers ran illegal gladiatorial games in the Outer Rim territories. They captured nobles, warriors, and other high-status individuals from various species and forced them to fight for the entertainment of criminal audiences. A psychic princess from the galaxy's most advanced civilization would be their ultimate. Jake felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place in his mind. The attackers had known exactly how to disable ethereal defenses because they had studied similar operations for months. They had targeted the ceremony because it provided the perfect cover for their escape. Most importantly, they had taken the ad. Princess to a location where her own people couldn't follow. Kethmiran's mental voice carried shock and disbelief. The Ethereal Confederation had treaties with every civilized government in the galaxy. No one would dare harbor criminals who had kidnapped their princess. He couldn't understand why anyone would take such a risk. Amy looked up from her scanner with grim determination on her face. She had traced the neural inhibitor shipping records. It had been sent to Bloodrock Station, a massive asteroid converted into a criminal haven in the Void Sector. No government claimed jurisdiction over that region of space. It was controlled entirely by criminal organizations that preyed on the weak and lawless. Jake knew about Bloodrock Station from intelligence briefings. It was where the galaxy's worst criminals gathered to trade in things that civilized species wouldn't touch. Slaves, illegal weapons, stolen technology, and worse. Even hardened space marines avoided that region unless they had overwhelming firepower. And good reasons for being there. The Ethereal Council would never send their own forces to such a place. Their advanced ships and psychic warriors were designed for clean technological warfare. They couldn't function in an environment where treachery and brutality were the only rules that mattered, but humans could. Jake had grown up on Earth, where survival often meant adapting to hostile environments and dangerous situations. He had fought pirates in asteroid fields and hunted criminals through the twisted alleys of frontier colonies. Bloodrock Station would be dangerous, but it wouldn't be impossible. He looked at Amy and Ben, seeing the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his own chest. They were going to get the princess back, even if it meant walking into the most dangerous place in the galaxy. The ship that would take them to Bloodrock Station didn't look like much from the outside. Captain Lisa Stone had painted it to look like a worn-out cargo hauler that had seen too many years in space. Rust stains covered the hull, and several panels appeared to be held in place with emergency patches. Anyone looking at it would think the crew was desperate enough to take any job that paid. Jake suited up in the cramped quarters below deck while Lisa prepared for the jump to hyperspace. His uniform had been replaced with the kind of clothes worn by mercenaries and bounty hunters in the outer territories. A worn leather jacket over basic body armor, with weapons that looked military surplus rather than official issue. Amy and Ben had undergone similar transformations. Amy studied the intelligence files they had gathered about Bloodrock Station. The asteroid had been hollowed out and converted into a massive underground city. 3 million beings lived there, most of them wanted by law enforcement somewhere in the galaxy. The station had its own atmosphere, artificial gravity, and even weather systems created by stolen terraforming equipment. Ben worked on their fake identification papers. Each of them now had a complete criminal history that would stand up to casual inspection. Jake was supposed to be a former Earth military officer who had been discharged for excessive violence. Amy was a disgraced intelligence analyst selling information to the highest bidder. Ben was a tech specialist who modified weapons for criminal organizations. The hardest part was learning to think like criminals while maintaining their real mission. Jake had to appear tough enough to survive in a place where weakness meant death, but not so dangerous that other criminals would see him as a threat. It was a careful balance that required perfect acting skills. Lisa's voice came through the ship's communication system. They were approaching the void sector and would reach Blood Rock Station in 6 hours. She reminded them that once they docked, they would be completely cut off from any backup or support. If something went wrong, they would be on their own in the most dangerous place in known space. Jake checked his equipment one final time. His weapons were real, but appeared to be cheap knockoffs. His communication gear was hidden inside what looked like a standard scanner used by salvage crews. Most importantly, he carried a small medical injector that contained a dose of the antidote for the neural inhibitor drug they believed was being used on Princess Lyra Death. Amy showed them the layout of Blood Rock Station that she had pieced together from criminal intelligence reports. The station was divided into different sectors, controlled by various gangs and organizations. The Void Reapers controlled the entertainment district, which included the illegal fighting arenas. Getting there would require passing through territories controlled by at least 3 other criminal groups. Ben had prepared bribes in the form of untraceable credit, chips, and rare technology components. In a place like Blood Rock Station, everything could be bought for the right price. Information, passage through gang territory, even temporary protection could be purchased if you knew who to ask and how much to pay. The ship shuddered as Lisa brought them out of hyperspace. Through the small porthole, Jake could see Blood Rock Station growing larger against the star field. It looked like a giant metal tumor attached to the asteroid's surface. Lights flickered across its surface in patterns that suggested a city that never slept. Lisa guided their ship toward one of the many docking bays that dotted the station's exterior. She had to pay docking fees to 3 different criminal organizations just to land safely. Each group controlled different sections of the docking area and demanded their cut of any business conducted on their territory. As they prepared to leave the ship, Jake felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Somewhere in that maze of criminal hideouts and illegal businesses, Princess Lyra was being held prisoner. She was counting on them to find her, even though she had no way of knowing they were coming. The docking bay smelled of fuel, unwashed, bodies, and something that might have been rotting food. Dozens of ships were berthed around them, ranging from sleek racing vessels to massive cargo haulers. Most showed signs of modification with additional weapons or armor plating. This was clearly not a place where honest merchants conducted business. Jake led his team through the customs checkpoint, which was run by a gang of aliens he didn't recognize. They had too many arms and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. The customs officer barely looked at their faked papers before stamping them and demanding a processing fee. Everything here operated on corruption and intimidation. The main corridor beyond customs was like walking through the worst parts of every frontier colony Jake had ever visited. Neon signs advertised services in dozens of alien languages. Street vendors sold weapons, drugs, and stranger things from makeshift stalls. The air was thick with smoke and the constant noise of different species arguing, laughing, and conducting business. Amy stayed close behind Jake as they made their way through the crowds. Her training in intelligence gathering was already paying off as she identified key locations and potential sources of information. She pointed out a bar that catered to off-duty arena guards and a shop that specialized in gladiatorial equipment. Ben kept his scanner running, ostensibly looking for salvage opportunities, but actually mapping the station's layout and security systems. The technology here was a mixture of advanced alien systems and crude modifications. It created security gaps that could be exploited by someone who understood both high-tech and low-tech approaches. They found rooms at a hotel that asked no questions about its guests as long as they paid in advance. The accommodations were basic, but clean, with sound dampening that would prevent their conversations from being overheard. Jake established their base of operations while Amy and Ben began gathering intelligence. The first breakthrough came from the bar Amy had identified. After buying drinks for several arena guards, she learned that a special event was being planned for the end of the week. A new fighter had been acquired, someone important enough that tickets were selling for 10 times the normal price. Guards wouldn't say who the fighter was, but their excitement suggested it was someone significant. Ben had better luck with the equipment shop owner, who was eager to discuss the modifications he had been asked to make recently. Someone had ordered a special containment cell designed to hold a telepathic prisoner. The cell would not only prevent escape, but also amplify the occupant's psychic distress for the entertainment of spectators who enjoyed psychological torture. Along with physical combat, Jake felt anger building in his chest as he processed this information. The princess wasn't just being forced to fight. She was being tortured for the entertainment of beings who found suffering amusing. This made the rescue mission personal in a way that went beyond duty or orders. That night, Jake studied the intelligence they had gathered while planning their next moves. The arena complex was heavily guarded and built like a fortress. Direct assault would be impossible without heavy weapons and a much larger team. They would need to find another way inside, preferably one that didn't involve fighting through. Hundreds of armed criminals. Amy suggested they pose as potential buyers interested in purchasing gladiatorial services. Rich criminals often visited Bloodrock Station to commission private fights featuring specific opponents. If they could convince Arena Master Kronex that they represented wealthy clients, they might be able to get close enough to locate the princess. Ben pointed out a problem with this approach. Their fake identities were good enough to pass casual inspection, but they wouldn't hold up under the kind of detailed scrutiny that major criminal organizations used when dealing with large amounts of money. They needed a different angle that played to their actual strengths rather than pretending to be something they weren't. Jake had an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. Instead of pretending to be buyers, they could present themselves as problem solvers. Every criminal organization had enemies and competitors who caused trouble. If they could convince the Void Reapers that they were skilled enough to handle certain problems, they might be able to earn access to restricted areas of the arena complex. It was a dangerous plan that required them to actually commit criminal acts to maintain their cover. But Jake had learned something important during his years of military service. Sometimes the only way to stop evil was to get close enough to understand how it worked. And sometimes that meant walking through darkness to reach the light on the other side. The next morning, they began putting their plan into action. Jake crawled through the maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the arena complex. The metal walls were hot from the energy conduits that powered the facility above. Behind him, Amy and Ben moved quietly through the cramped space, following the route Ben had mapped during their reconnaissance of the station's infrastructure. Getting this far had required 3 days of careful work. They had proven themselves to the Void Reapers by solving a problem with a rival gang that had been interfering with arena operations. Jake's military training and Amy's intelligence skills had made the job look easy, which impressed Arena Master Kronex enough to offer them more lucrative work. The maintenance tunnel ended at a junction box that controlled power to the prisoner holding cells. Ben attached his scanner to the alien technology and began the delicate process of creating a temporary power outage that would look like equipment failure rather than sabotage. They would have exactly 12 minutes before backup power systems activated. Jake checked his chronometer and signaled for the operation to begin. Ben's fingers moved across his scanner's interface as he sent carefully crafted commands to the station's power grid. Lights flickered throughout this section of the complex as non-essential systems went offline to conserve energy for life support. They moved quickly through corridors that were now lit only by emergency lighting. Jake's enhanced vision allowed him to navigate in the dim conditions, while Amy used her scanner to detect security sensors and surveillance equipment that might still be operating on backup power. Most of the systems were offline, but they couldn't take chances. The holding cells were located 3 levels below the main arena floor. Jake had memorized the layout during their reconnaissance, but seeing it in person was different. The corridor was lined with reinforced doors that muffled sounds from within. Each door had a small window that allowed guards to check on prisoners without opening the cells. Jake moved from door to door, looking through the windows while Amy watched for guards who might investigate the power outage. Most of the cells contained fighters from various species, all showing signs of the brutal training regimen used to prepare them for combat. Some were injured, others looked broken in spirit as well as body. The 6th cell contained Princess Lyra, clenched when he saw her condition. The proud, glowing being he had witnessed at the ceremony was gone. Her skin had lost its luminous quality and appeared almost gray. Her silver hair hung limp around her shoulders. She sat in the corner of the cell with her knees drawn up to her chest, staring at nothing. The cell door was secured with both electronic locks and physical barriers, designed to contain beings with supernatural abilities. Ben went to work on the electronic systems, while Jake examined the physical restraints. The door was made of some kind of metal that absorbed energy, preventing telepathic beings from using their powers to escape. Amy kept watch while Jake whispered through the door window to get the princess's attention. At first, she didn't respond, as if she couldn't hear him or had given up hope of rescue. When he called her name more urgently, she slowly looked up. Her eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been recognition. Ben's scanner beeped softly as the electronic locks disengaged. The physical barriers required a different approach. Jake used a small cutting torch to slice through the energy-absorbing metal while trying to avoid triggering security alarms. The work was slow and delicate, made more difficult by the need for absolute silence. Princess Lyra moved closer to the door as she realized what was happening. Jake could see hope returning to her eyes, but also fear that this might be some kind of cruel trick designed to torture her psychologically. He showed her the medical injector containing the antidote to the neural inhibitor drug, hoping she would understand that he was really there to help. The cell door finally opened with a soft hiss of equalizing air pressure. Jake stepped inside, while Amy maintained watch in the corridor. The princess tried to stand, but stumbled, weakened by days of captivity and the drugs that suppressed her abilities. Jake caught her arm to steady her, noting how cold her skin felt. Compared to the warm glow he remembered, she tried to speak, but no sound came from her throat. The neural inhibitor had affected her vocal cords as well as her telepathic abilities. Jake administered the antidote injection, while explaining in whispers that they were human soldiers sent to rescue her. He warned her that it would take several minutes for the antidote to take effect and restore her powers. Ben's scanner detected movement in the corridor above them. Guards were investigating the power outage and would soon discover that someone had accessed the holding cells. They had perhaps 5 minutes before the entire complex would be swarming with armed criminals looking for intruders. Jake supported Princess Lyra as they moved toward the emergency exit route Amy had identified during their planning phase. The princess was gaining strength as the antidote worked through her system, but she was still too weak to move quickly on her own. They would have to carry her part of the way, The emergency exit led to a loading dock, where Lisa was supposed to be waiting with their ship. But as they approached the final corridor, Amy's scanner detected an energy signature that made Jake's blood run cold. Arena Master Chronix was waiting for them with a full squad of guards. The trap had been perfectly planned. Chronix had suspected their true identity from the beginning and had allowed them to penetrate the complex, so he could capture them along with any rescue team that might be sent. He stepped into view with a weapon that looked like it could cut through starship armor. Chronix's voice carried the confidence of someone who had never been defeated in his own territory. He explained that Jake and his team would make excellent additions to his gladiatorial roster. Human soldiers were rare in this part of the galaxy, and their reputation for refusing to surrender would provide excellent entertainment for his audiences. Jake felt Princess Lyranith straightening beside him as her powers began to return. Her skin was starting to glow faintly, and her eyes showed the first hints of the psychic energy he remembered from the ceremony. The antidote was working, but she needed more time to reach full strength. Amy and Ben moved to defensive positions without being told. They had worked together long enough to communicate through subtle gestures and shared understanding. Amy's scanner showed 6 guards in addition to Chronix, all armed with energy weapons that could kill a human in one shot. The princess's mental voice suddenly whispered in Jake's head, still weak but clearly present. She told him that her powers were returning, but she needed him to trust her completely. She could create a distraction that would give them a chance to escape, but only if he was willing to do something that would seem impossible. Jake didn't hesitate. He had come too far and risked too much to doubt her now. He told her he was ready for whatever she needed him to do. Princess Lyranith placed her hand on Jake's shoulder. Her touch was warm now, growing warmer as her abilities returned to full strength. She told him to close his eyes and trust in something that human science couldn't explain, but human courage made possible. The corridor exploded with silver light as the princess unleashed her telepathic powers at full intensity. But instead of attacking their enemies, she created a connection between herself and Jake that amplified his natural human abilities beyond their normal limits. His reflexes became superhuman, his strength increased dramatically, and his awareness expanded to encompass the entire tactical situation. Jake moved like lightning through the group of guards, his enhanced abilities allowing him to disarm them before they could react. Amy and Ben provided covering fire, while the princess maintained the psychic link that made Jake temporarily more than human. Together, they fought their way through Chronix's forces and reached the loading dock where Lisa was waiting. As their ship lifted off from Bloodrock Station, Jake felt the princess's enhancement fading from his system. His abilities returned to normal levels, leaving him exhausted but triumphant. They had succeeded in the impossible rescue mission and proven that human determination, combined with alien abilities, could overcome any obstacle. Princess Lyranith sat beside him as they entered hyperspace, her glow fully restored and her mental voice strong once again. She thanked him not just for the rescue, but for showing her something about courage that her own advanced civilization had forgotten in their pursuit of technological perfection. The journey back to Zephyria Prime took 4 days through hyperspace. Princess Lyranith spent most of that time in the ship's medical bay, recovering from her ordeal while Lisa monitored her condition. The neural inhibitor had done more damage than just suppressing her telepathic abilities. It had affected her entire nervous system, requiring careful treatment to avoid permanent harm. Jake found himself checking on the princess frequently during the journey. Each time he visited the medical bay, she seemed a little stronger and more like the confident leader he had witnessed at the ceremony. Her skin regained its natural luminous quality, and her silver hair began to move with the ethereal grace that marked her species. On the second day, she was well enough to sit up and speak normally. Her voice carried the musical quality that Jake remembered, but there was something different about it now. She had experienced fear and helplessness in a way that most ethereals never did. This had changed her perspective on strength and vulnerability in ways that would affect her leadership for years to come. She asked Jake to tell her about Earth and human civilization. During her captivity, she had overheard her captors discussing humanity with a mixture of fear and contempt that puzzled her. How could a species that was considered primitive by galactic standards inspire such strong reactions from hardened criminals? Jake explained that humans had learned to survive in environments that other species found impossible. Earth was a harsh world compared to many inhabited planets, with extreme weather, dangerous predators, and natural disasters that forced humans to adapt or die. This had created a species that refused to give up even when facing overwhelming odds. Princess Lyraneth listened carefully as Jake described human history. Wars that lasted for generations, explorations into unknown territories despite terrible risks, and scientific discoveries made by people who were told their ideas were impossible. She began to understand that human strength came not from technology or natural abilities, but from an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Amy joined their conversations on the third day, sharing her observations about the differences between human and ethereal approaches to problem solving. While ethereals relied on their advanced minds and technological superiority, humans used creativity and determination to find solutions that logical thinking might overlook. Ben demonstrated this by showing the princess how he had modified their ship's systems during the rescue mission. Using basic human engineering principles, he had improved the efficiency of the ethereal-designed engines by 15%. The modifications were simple but effective, proving that sometimes primitive approaches could enhance advanced technology. The princess was fascinated by these examples of human ingenuity. Her own people had become so focused on perfecting their existing abilities that they had stopped looking for new ways to solve problems. They assumed that superior technology and mental powers would always provide the best solutions to any challenge. As they approached Zephyria Prime, Princess Lyraneth asked Jake about his reasons for volunteering for such a dangerous rescue mission. She pointed out that he could have refused the assignment or recommended that the Ethereal Confederation handle the situation using their own resources. Why had he been willing to risk his life for someone he barely knew? Jake thought carefully. Before answering, he explained that humans had a concept called duty that went beyond following orders or serving their own interests. When someone was in danger and you had the ability to help, you acted regardless of the personal cost. This wasn't unique to military personnel, but was part of human nature itself. The princess's mental voice carried wonder as she processed this concept. Ethereal society was built on logical cooperation and mutual benefit. While they worked together effectively, they did so because it served their collective interests. The idea of self-sacrifice for abstract principles was foreign to their highly rational culture. She told Jake that his actions had taught her something important about leadership. True strength wasn't about having the most advanced technology or the greatest personal power. It was about being willing to put yourself at risk for others, even when logic suggested that such actions were foolish or wasteful. Lisa's voice came through the ship's communication system as they dropped out of hyperspace. Zephyria Prime filled the view screen ahead of them, its crystal cities gleaming like jewels against the planet's purple atmosphere. Ethereal patrol ships moved to escort them to the capital, their graceful forms dancing through space with impossible elegance. The landing at the royal spaceport was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Thousands of ethereals had gathered to welcome their princess home. Their combined telepathic voices created a harmony that resonated through the ship's hull and touched the minds of everyone aboard. It was a sound of pure joy and relief that transcended Species barriers. Counselor Velteran was waiting at the bottom of the landing ramp. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of emotion as Princess Lyraneth walked down to meet him. She moved with renewed grace and confidence, her ordeal having strengthened rather than broken her spirit. The reunion between mentor and student was conducted in rapid telepathic communication that excluded the humans. Jake stood at attention with Amy and Ben as the princess addressed the gathered crowd. Her mental voice reached every mind present as she told them about her rescue and the courage of the human team that had risked everything to bring her home. She spoke about lessons learned during her captivity and insights gained about the nature of true strength. The crowd's reaction surprised Jake. Instead of simply acknowledging the human service, many ethereals approached them directly to offer personal thanks. Some touched their minds gently, with telepathic gratitude that felt like warm sunlight. Others simply bowed in the formal manner used to show respect between equals. Counselor Velteran requested a private meeting with Jake in the royal palace. The crystal corridors seemed different now, less intimidating and more welcoming than they had during his previous visit. The counselor's mental presence felt warmer as well, lacking the cold superiority that had marked their earlier interactions. Meeting took place in a chamber overlooking the capital city. Velteran explained that the princess's rescue had forced the ethereal council to reconsider their assumptions about humanity and its place in galactic civilization. They had been wrong to dismiss humans as a primitive species, unworthy of serious consideration. Jake listened as the counselor outlined the new partnership between the Ethereal Confederation and Earth's Colonial Defense Force. The agreement would provide humans with advanced medical technology and educational resources in exchange for security services and tactical consultation. It was a relationship based on mutual respect rather than condescending charity. More importantly, Princess Lyraneth would be leading a cultural exchange program designed to help both species learn from each other. She believed that ethereal civilization had become too focused on technological advancement at the expense of the courage and determination that made true progress possible. Jake accepted the counselor's thanks on behalf of his team and his species. He explained that humans didn't seek recognition or rewards for doing what was right. The knowledge that Princess Lyraneth was safe and that their actions had helped build understanding between species was reward enough. As he prepared to leave Zephyria Prime, Jake reflected on the mission and its unexpected consequences. They had set out to rescue one person and ended up changing the relationship between entire civilizations. It was a reminder that individual actions could have effects far beyond their intended scope. Princess Lyraneth came to see him off at the spaceport. Her mental voice carried warmth and friendship as she thanked him once more for his courage and determination. She promised that the lessons learned during her rescue would guide her leadership for the rest of her life. Jake saluted formally before boarding the transport that would take him back to Earth. As the ship lifted off from Zephyria Prime, he looked back at the crystal cities one final time. He had come to this world as a simple soldier following orders. He was leaving as an ambassador for humanity and a bridge between species that had previously misunderstood each other. The mission was complete, but its impact would continue for generations to come. Princess Lyraneth would become one of the galaxy's most respected leaders, known for her wisdom and her understanding of the courage that defined true strength. And Jake would return to his duties knowing that sometimes the most important battles were won not through superior firepower, but through the simple human refusal to leave anyone behind.